Boomers, in a world where democracy is tested daily, I want to remind you of the words of Jimmy Carter, who just recently passed on at age 100. The best way to enhance freedom in other lands is to demonstrate here in this country that our democratic system is worth emulation. And that was what he worked for, and for years, to have our country worth emulation as it came to democracy. What does it mean for America to be a model for democracy? And how can we meet this challenge today? Jimmy Carter was president from 1977 to 1981. He was shaped by the commitment to human rights and global diplomacy. And in my opinion, he was the epitome of what a great person, religious person, a person who would take the shirt off his back to give to somebody in need, just like Jesus would. Um, he brokered the deal at Camp David Accords for the Mideast, and he advocated for free elections globally. So he did not believe that America's strength was in the economy or in the military, although I think he was grateful for those things. But he believed that freedom, equality, and democratic governance was at the heart of what makes this country great. And of course, having differences of opinion and having respect for people who do not agree with you was at the heart of his way of being, his way of being. Um, he pushed for human rights globally, which is just so cool. And the America's credibility as a global leader begins with how we uphold democracy at home, said Carter. But now we have increasing division in political, social, and cultural spheres. There's deep partisanship in Congress and rising hostility in public discourse. Um, there is voter suppression that has not gotten any better. We have not solved that problem. Legislation affecting voter access, especially for marginalized communities, has not been successful thus far. And there are voter turnout disparities. The statistics are not adding up. And examples of recent controversies in states like Georgia and Texas underline what I just said. The spread of misinformation and its impact on public trust in elections and institutions is unparalleled in this last election. Um, Misinformation, people need to educate themselves. They need to understand what America is about in terms of how Washington runs, and in terms of how we as human beings can have an effect on our democracy. What can we do to make democracy a living, breathing entity in America again? You know, we had the 2020 elections and um, the misinformation about who won that election. Well, we knew Joe Biden won that election, but for years there has been this misinformation about the fact that, in fact, even as late as last night, talking about how Biden did not win that election. And then the storming of the Capitol on January 6th of 2021 was one of the worst diabolical things I had ever seen with my own eyes. I was the very moment that the thing happened, I turned on television and watched it. So people's trust in the government has fallen, and we need to start again. We need to begin again to become what we want our country to be. We have to become that ourselves. We can't just continuously fight and believe that people are out coming to get you. This is not the way to be a healthy human being. But but there are good things. The U.S. has supported democratic transitions in Eastern Europe post Cold War, and there have been global impacts of movements inspired by American civil rights leaders. Even though the January 6th insurrection diminished America's credibility, but that is just the way it is. And on the day that Trump takes office, he has vowed to release these insurrectionists and pardon them, which is like allowing criminals to go out into the streets. What does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? But even so, countries look to America as a benchmark. When America falters, authoritarian regimes use it to justify suppressing freedoms. So, but there are inspiring democratic movements versus movements of U.S. instability. These things are not mutually exclusive. We live in a time when there's so much population, so many people in the world that you can't really help to hope to have something that is cohesive amongst human beings who are notoriously not taking care of themselves. When America stumbles, democracy suffers everywhere. So this is what we can do. We need federal and state efforts to protect voting access. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act needs to be reinstituted. We need to vote out the oligarchs. We need to encourage viewers to volunteer as poll workers or support voter registration drives and improve civic education in schools. Civics is something I had in my lifetime as a young girl. We were taught critical thinking, we had debates, and civic responsibility in schools was taught. And we had mock elections, and we had town halls at our schools. These things are not happening right now. But there are community leaders working across partisan lines to build bridges. There's a nonprofit called Braver Angels that host workshops to reduce polarization. And we need to have people understand the Constitution as it was written. And we need to have debates and people discussing the Constitution. We should demand transparency and accountability from our elected officials because they seem to be voted into office and then they make millions and millions of dollars as opposed to helping the common. Jimmy Carter did not make money off his job as president, and we all I think that he made his wealth from the books that he wrote. And there's another website called Vote Smart to track the politicians' records. We need to know how these people voted, and then if we don't like it, we need to vote them out. There need to be local voting drives, classrooms teaching civics, groups engaging in productive dialogue, not shouting at each other and not trying to drown out the other person's point of view, and not gaslighting people. And having respect for people is really where it's at. So the Habitat for Humanity was Carter's work after he left the presidency, and that is service and leadership that he carried with him until his death. He continued the advocacy for democracy through peace through the Carter Center, and I would love to go to see the Carter Center. And Carter's vision of moral leadership is crucial in 2024. And for him to have died at this time, to juxtapose and make it clear how he lived and how these politicians today are just greedy oligarchs. That kind of contrast is what is needed for people to understand. So, what is your personal responsibility in strengthening democracy? What is my personal responsibility to strengthen democracy? And we can look to Jimmy Carter as the model for helping us to achieve that. We can, understand that Jimmy Carter showed us that leadership is more than politics. It's about service, accountability, and hope. His challenge to make America a model democracy remains an urgent call for us all. What are you all feeling about this? The best way to enhance freedom in other lands is to demonstrate that our democracy is worth emulation. Take a look at this next video that shows up, subscribe and like, and enjoy.